You think you know the story of rock and roll. We all know the big names, right? But there's this whole other history that's been kind of hiding in the shadows. So today, we're going to turn up the volume on the incredible women who grabbed a guitar, stepped up to the mic, and completely changed the game.
Okay, quick, I want you to try something. If I ask you to name a founding father of rock, who pops into your head? Elvis, maybe? Chuck Berry? Yeah, pretty easy. Their names are absolute legends.
But what if I flip that around? Can you name a founding mother of rock and roll? That's a bit tougher, isn't it? And that is exactly what we're going to fix today. Get ready to meet the original queen of rock.
So our story starts way back, long before the so-called kings of rock were even on the scene. We have to go right to the beginning to meet the godmother of rock. Her name was Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and back in the 1940s and 50s, she was an absolute superstar. She took gospel music and mixed it with a sound that, well, nobody had ever heard before. And she wasn't just singing, she was seriously shredding on the electric guitar.
So why that title? Because her guitar playing was loud. It was distorted. You know, that awesome, fuzzy, gritty sound you hear in rock, and it was just full of incredible energy. This was basically the DNA of rock and roll. I mean, future legends like Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry actually watched her perform and were totally blown away by her style. She literally wrote the first page of the rock guitar playbook.
All right, let's jump forward to the 1960s, because this is where things get really interesting. This decade saw a huge shift, starting with this super polished pop sound and ending with something raw, rebellious, and totally new.
So in the early 60s, girl groups like the Ronettes were just everywhere. Their sound was massive, super catchy, perfect for dancing, with these huge orchestras behind them. They were all over the charts with songs about love and high school drama, but there was a catch. Most of the time, powerful male producers were calling all the shots, from the songs they sang to the matching dresses they wore.
But as the decade moved on, you could feel something changing. The counterculture was bubbling up, you know? Young people starting to question everything. And out of that came a completely different kind of female musician, one who was not going to be put in a box.
And the difference was night and day. On one side, you had the perfect, polished sound of the girl groups, and on the other, you had artists like Janis Joplin and Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane. Their voices were raw and unbelievably powerful. Their music was wild, with these long, experimental guitar solos. And they weren't singing about crushes, they were writing anthems for a generation that was demanding change.
Now we're diving into the 1970s. This was a decade where women didn't just join the party. They started creating their own scenes, taking total creative control and really reshaping the sound of music.
And things moved so fast in the 70s. It kicked off with incredible singer-songwriters like Carole King and Joni Mitchell, who were writing these deeply personal hits all on their own. Then, boom, mid-decade, you've got Ann and Nancy Wilson from the band Heart, proving that women could write huge, heavy hard rock riffs. And to cap it all off, by '77, punk rock just explodes onto the scene, with icons like Patti Smith and Debbie Harry basically tearing up the rulebook and starting over.
Okay, so we have to talk about what punk rock really was. It was a revolution, plain and simple. It wasn't about being a technical genius on your instrument. It was about having something to say and having the guts to yell it. This whole do-it-yourself or DIY spirit meant that literally anyone could start a band. And for women, this was huge. It was a way to get on stage and be heard without having to ask anyone for permission.
All right, let's jump into the 80s and 90s. This is when a brand new invention, the music video, took female rock musicians from being famous and made them into global icons, playing on the biggest stages in the world. Seriously, the launch of MTV changed everything. All of a sudden, music wasn't just for your ears, it was for your eyes too. Artists like Pat Benatar and the one and only Tina Turner used music videos to create these powerful, unforgettable images that were beamed into millions of homes. They became household names, as famous for their incredible stage presence as for their amazing voices. Then, as we roll into the 90s, things shift again. The glossy, big hair look of the 80s made way for something called alternative rock. And it was called alternative because it was just that, a grittier, more honest alternative to mainstream pop. This was a space for artists who didn't quite fit the mold, and women were right at the front of it, writing these raw, honest, and sometimes angry songs that just connected with millions. And out of that alternative scene, a super important movement called Riot Grrrl was born. It wasn't just about music. It was a full-on call to action. And it had this simple but brilliant playbook. Step 1, start your own band. Step 2, make your own magazines. They called them fanzines. 3, use your art to talk about real issues. And 4, most importantly, empower other girls to do the exact same thing. It was all about building a community.
So all that history, where does it leave us today? Well, all of those amazing pioneers built the foundation. And now, a whole new generation is taking what they started and launching it straight into the future. The scene today is just wide open. You've got band leaders like Hayley Williams from Paramore, who's an icon to an entire generation. And then you have sonic pioneers like St. Vincent, who uses technology to make the electric guitar do things you've never heard before. Artists can now connect directly with their fans online, and they're blending rock with anything and everything, pop, electronic, you name it. There are basically no rules anymore, which is awesome. And that really brings us to this powerful idea. Because of all these women, from Sister Rosetta Tharpe all the way to today's indie artists, just the sight of a woman holding an electric guitar has become this major symbol. It represents independence, power, and the freedom to just make your own noise. So when you really look at the whole picture, it's pretty clear. This was never just a story about music. It's a story about breaking down barriers, about challenging what people thought was possible, and about building something that would last for generations to come.
This has been a journey that's been happening for over 70 years. Think about that. From one trailblazing guitarist in the 1940s to a massive global movement today, these women have permanently changed not just the songs we listen to, but our entire culture.
And that legacy is still being written. It just proves that one person with a cool idea and enough passion really can make a huge difference. So I guess the only question left is, who's going to be next?